All right, Kenny, welcome to the GTM Pack podcast. Super excited to chat with you today.
Thanks so much for having me. Absolutely loved hearing some of the previous episodes that you've had. So I am absolutely grateful to be here.
Awesome. Well, it's funny. We go back actually a little while, and I think, you were at Dynamic Signal. I was at Tracker. And recently we just sort of reconnected at a product marketing event and started geeking out about all the changes that are going on in product marketing and demand gen and sales enablement. So I just knew we had to have you on the podcast so that we could share all this geeking out with the rest of the geeks out there, right?
Awesome. No, I totally get it. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Well, for those that aren't familiar with you, maybe you can give a little bit of a background on your career, your journey, and how you came to the point you are right now, where you're sort of a product marketing and demand gen expert consulting with all kinds of different SaaS companies.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. So I will say that I didn't go to school for marketing or business administration. My background from an education perspective was urban design and planning. And if you're an urban planner, you know that it's all about building cities. How do you actually strategically grow a town to a city in a thoughtful, organized way? So as a kid, I played a lot of SimCity growing up. And similar concept, right? You have zoning, infrastructure, you're building services, and it's all tied to a budget. And if you do everything right, the city and town grows. And the funny thing is, decades later, I'm doing that in marketing because I often feel like that's what marketing is all about, is trying to balance a lot of these different components to help grow a business. So really my formative years, when I started my career in marketing, I was the country manager for Adobe Systems in Canada. That's my little moose there that gives it a little tell. But I grew up in Toronto, Canada, was running marketing for Adobe. And really at that time, it was field marketing. And the biggest thing I learned, Justin, was when you're in field marketing, running the country, running the marketing for that country, it's really about integrated campaigns, working with the sales teams in the trenches, shoulder to shoulder. So I gained a lot of empathy for what sales goes through, the challenges they have. Adobe was public at that time, so we had a 90-day shot clock, and every 90 days we're trying to hit a number. And so, after being in field marketing for a while, I kept asking these questions like, why this target audience? Why that vertical? Why are we going after this versus that? Or help me understand this customer more. And that's when Adobe said, Kenny, why don't you come down to California and spend a couple of years in product marketing? So I did that. And then I went down to California and I did the next probably 8 years in product marketing for Adobe Acrobat and the PDF business. And that's where I learned all of the foundational elements of what great product marketing looks like. So who's your ICP, your TAM, SAM analysis, personas, audiences, customer journeys. You do all of the things around pricing, packaging. Enablement was a big piece of that as well. So I really learned a lot there. But after 15 years at Adobe, I needed a change. And that's when I went into startups. And there was this whole new thing around modern demand generation. You could start to measure the impact of your marketing efforts. And that's when I went to Dynamic Signal. And I went, I'll kind of fast forward, but I went through several different, large, medium, and small startups, really working deep inside these companies, understanding the mechanics of modern marketing. So I implemented several different demand systems, started to understand wow, there's this thing called Marketo, or there's Eloqua, or there's HubSpot. And then how does that connect with account-based marketing? I was an early demand-based customer when I was at a company called Lithium. But in all of this, it was such a great experience being at these companies that were at the forefront of doing some pretty cool things. Like, given your experience at Tracker, Justin, that, hey, what is this thing called social? How do you bring it together, right? Super interesting experience at Dynamic Signal. Also interesting experience because I was at Twitter and I got the chance to work at a social startup not startup, but a social company and see what that was all about. So I did all of that, and that's what led me actually after close to a 30-year run to do what I'm doing today, which is really around consulting. And I'm going to share with you that I've coined it, I'm learning while playing. So I don't have to tell you how AI is changing the game on all these different things, but I'm doing three things. So number one is I'm doing some part-time consulting, and I love marketing. I've been doing it for a long time. I always want to stay close to it. So I've got a couple of clients, one that I'm learning how to be a GTM engineer. So I am literally playing with Clay. I'm playing with Unify. I've played with Ample Market, and I'm building these, these different plays and campaigns to try to help my clients along. Just because I'm curious to see how do these things work, and working with clients gives me an opportunity to do that. The second thing that I'm doing is advising. So I've got a couple of really early stage startups that I'm advising for. And then the third thing that I'm doing is I'm actually in stealth mode building a product with a friend of mine. This isn't in the B2B space, but it's in the B2C space. And the whole idea, Justin, is we are trying to, we're both not engineers, but we are hacking our way through products like Cursor and, Learning Vercel to build a product. So it's slow. I won't lie. I'm not an engineer by trade, but the power of what you can do is insane. And so those are the things that I'm doing.
That's awesome. I mean, to me, it sounds like you're a super busy guy. You've got your consulting, your advising, and then you're building a product. But what a time. I mean, you mentioned GTM engineering and tools like Clay, and then obviously the LLMs that allow you to even build your own products as a non-developer. It's pretty amazing. And it sounds like you're knee deep in all that stuff. So that's really fascinating. And I'd love to unpack that a little bit more. But before that, you mentioned your career background, and it's really impressive. First of all, like amazing companies, right? Adobe, Twitter, Lithium, Dynamic Signal, like tons of amazing companies that you've had the chance to work with, but also the marketing experience, right? From field and partner marketing to product marketing to demand gen. I don't know that I've met many people that have such a well-rounded perspective
Thank you.
on marketing. So I guess, curious to hear how you believe or how you think that sort of wide array of experiences has shaped you as a marketer. And now as you get into your consulting business, how does that affect the way that you approach marketing as a consultant as well?
Yeah, great questions. So I'll go back to what I said earlier about just my schooling and background in the connection of all these complex systems working together. Being in marketing, in product marketing, field marketing and campaigns, doing modern demand generation, all of those things. As I went through different companies, working on these different problems, one of the recurring themes that came over and over again was just how connected everything was. Mm-hmm. And I'll just give you an example. So even on the marketing side alone, right? You could be in product marketing, you create all your messaging and content, and then you actually work with your email marketing team or your lifestyle marketing team. You work with PR, you work with content, you work with field marketing. And in many cases, and I've seen good and bad, but sorry, I shouldn't say bad, I'll say challenging. But you often see these silos within marketing, right? And how many times have you been at a company where you see the content team saying, here's my content strategy, right? And it's in a silo. The email marketing teams have an email marketing strategy and nothing is connected. And, my experience when I was at Zendesk, when I was leading global campaigns for the mid-market, it wasn't what does one thing do and one thing do and the other thing do. It is how does 1 + 1 + 1 = 5? And you start mapping things to some strategy like a customer journey, right? Versus random acts of marketing. So I started to see how, hey guys, we need to start working together and understand where buyers are based off of a ideal journey workflow that you're trying to understand where customers are. Now, that was great if you can get marketing together. But then what happens after you actually work with SDRs or the sales teams? And I have been at companies where, for example, marketing was gold on MQLs, SDRs might have been gold on BANT or budget authority need timing, and then sales was gold on MEDPIC. And all of them started working in their own silos again, and you had this disconnect. And maybe the easiest problems for your audience to understand is what happens when marketing hits their pipeline goals, but SDRs maybe just hit or miss their pipeline targets for new and expansion, but sales is missing their bookings goals, right? No one's happy. No one wins. Or the flip side, right? Marketing missed their pipeline goals 2 quarters in a row. SDRs hit it and missed it, but the sales teams hit their numbers, or we see a lot of churn, right? There's no real clear understanding of how all those work together. And I think that, without going into a deep rabbit hole, Justin, I think the last 15 years, the reason for all of those things was in the last 15 years of growth at all costs, zero interest rates in the marketplace. Everybody was in a buying mood. You could set off all those things on their own and you were still hitting your numbers, irrespective of whether or not you were profitable or not, right? And so now the market's changed, the environment has changed. That adage of when the tide goes out, you see who doesn't have great GTM. This is exactly what's happening. And so the good news is all of this stuff is changing. I think it's actually a really positive thing that's been happening. Teams are starting to work together. Oh my God, people are actually thinking about, wait a minute, based on my customer journey, should I really be living in MQLs versus MQAs or account-based approaches? All of that is happening, but it's happening slowly. And I'll answer your question about how has it impacted my approach to consulting. What I've found is that in breaking these silos and driving a lot of getting teams on the same page, a lot of it is around change management. And one of the things that I've seen is that driving change is really hard in companies. And there's an adage of the rate of change is equal to the rate of trust that there is in the organization. Companies that have poor trust, change is really hard, right? Oh, I don't trust marketing. Like they're just trying to get around to different goals that are easier for them. Or, oh my God, the sales teams, I give all of this pipeline and they're not even actually dispositioning it, or it's all going to the wayside, right? So there has to be basically a lot of trust between the organizations. And I think in a lot of cases, you have to figure out what is that trust language. And why I'm saying all this is that when I pivoted from working in organizations to then now being my own consultant, as someone who's seen it all and really realized the force multiplier you get by working together, as a consultant coming into a company, I realized that my first at-bats I sounded very professorial, very academic, versus I have this problem right now that I'm trying to solve for. Yeah. I get we need to actually break these silos, but I need these fires that actually need to be, flamed out. And so that transition was something that I had to make to realize, oh, wait a minute, I've got to figure out how to figure out what is that trust language that I need to actually give to the CEO or to the executive who wants to bring me in. Often it's been a balance of, okay, how do I help you do strategic execution, but then be able to open doors and really look at the bigger problems that the company is having. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been adjusting. It's still a work in progress. I won't lie, Justin, but it's something that I passionately believe in. And I think that a lot of problems can be solved by looking at basically the business in whole. And there's a whole conversation we can have around how you do that I'm happy to, follow up on.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And I guess one follow-up question I'd have for you. So I think, again, your background, your experience across these disciplines allows you to see things in a much more holistic way, right? And my experience is most companies, there are those silos. Maybe those silos are breaking down, and that's an awesome thing. But we hear all the time about like sales and marketing misalignment, and the use case that you mentioned actually, right? Which is like, marketing just hit their MQL goal. Why is sales missing the revenue goal, right? Well, the leads weren't good, and all these different things, right? So what is a sort of solution to that problem, right? Is it like sharing the goal, right? So like in this case, there's marketing with MQLs and sales with revenue and SDRs with something in between book meetings. Is it that marketing should own revenue as well, or that there should be a holistic goal across the teams that's revenue? What are some of the things that that you've found have been useful as a means of breaking those silos and creating more collaboration, or at least alignment between, let's say, those two teams to start, right? Marketing and sales.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm a big fan of a lot of the industry thought leaders. So people like Sangram Varjay of GTM Partners, Jaco van der Kuj from Winning by Design. There's so many great books as well. Like Elad Gil's got some great books out there as well about GTM. Without going into this whole rabbit hole, I'll just tell you that I'm a big believer, because this has been my lived experience, of you basically have, I'll use the Winning by Design, you have a bow tie, right? Or a double funnel, right? That looks at the entire life cycle. At the end of the day, I think if I put my product marketing hat on, I think a lot of GTM is like survey design, where I want to understand, like, from unaware to close one to, like, purchase, like renewal and advocacy and all that. I want to see this double funnel, and I want to know where people are in their journey, or where am I having opportunities or issues. So number one is you need a revenue operating model. You need a revenue factory, whatever you call it. You need a system that you can measure end to end with clear stage gates in and out across that entire journey. Why is that important? And why should product marketing care? Because you want to know if, hey, is my messaging resonating? Well, do I have a top of funnel problem because I see a lot of looky-loos but no looky-doos, and my demand gen teams can tell me what's going on? Or am I seeing, wait a minute, my sales teams need more pipeline, but I'm losing pipeline at stage 2 because the customer keeps ghosting us for some reason, which could be an enablement problem. Or it might be that there's no budget, or there's no need right now. They're saying mañana. That is a feedback loop, or a data-driven feedback loop, that actually helps me reinforce or galvanize my messaging, right? If my sales teams have a 10x pipeline coverage win ratio, that's an enablement problem, because it's costing a lot of money. And so it might not be a campaign problem. It could be something else. And so that's where everybody getting on the same page of a structured system, and then being able to look at the data, in a unified way, is really important. I'll tell you one fast thing, which is, and this is more in the B2B realm. One of the things that you often find is a salesperson will say, oh, I brought this lead in, or it came inbound, or I did an outbound from an SDR and they brought an opportunity in. Well, if you look at that account and look at all the members tied to that account that might have done some actions 2 years ago, you could see a steady stream of activity happening. And I think one of the things now that with technology you can do is map out all the touch points to show what that looks like, right? I'm not saying that someone's going to go and say, well, now I'm going to take the best of those and let's just only do those things. But it's helpful to understand, to get sales and marketing on the same page of how much work it takes to bring that customer all the way through that process of discovery, evaluation, learning, usage, onboarding, advocacy, all that stuff. So it's just getting on the same page on the data that's really important, to then figure out, okay, let's look honestly with empathy for each other at what's not working and what's working, and figure that out. So
that makes total sense. And I think that empathy is really important in that process, but also that holistic view. It's not just MQLs, it's those metrics across the customer journey, and where the bottlenecks are, and what we can do as individuals in different departments or in different disciplines to unlock those things. Yeah. Now, you talked a little bit there about, you started touching on product marketing and sort of different responsibilities of a product marketer. And the thing that we hear all the time, right, is like, man, product marketing is such a vast role, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what is your sort of definition of the charter of a product marketer? And why do you think it's so broad? And why do you think there's so much confusion or diversity in terms of like defining that role from company to company?
Yeah. My so my experience, like my core experience in product marketing was I built this foundational learning at Adobe, and I just I'm going to tell you that I think Adobe did product marketing really well. And I mentioned
Yeah.
earlier just all the core fundamental responsibilities of what a product marketer does. But the one thing that I think that Adobe also did a little differently was they made product marketing business owners. And so what they did, I'll just give you an example. So yes, product marketing had all the things around your TAM, Samsung, pricing, packaging, customer journeys, all that stuff. But they said, oh, and you're going to also own the business. And so we need you to model out if we, for example, on the Acrobat PDF business, if we now expand to a new vertical, architecture, engineering, construction, for example, what features do we need? Work with product management to figure out how do we enter that space. Now, is that actually a better gambit than expanding to more localized regions? In year 1, year 2, year 3, how much do you think we could extract from that? So we actually work with business analysts to try to model all those things out. It was a very strategic role. And then once we figured out our models, we worked with sales to negotiate, yes, what do we need? Do we need to hire AEC specialists? Do we need to actually, open up a country? What are the things that we need to do? All of that made you think deeply about not just building messaging and building all this fun stuff, but how will it actually drive the business and what are the most important things to focus on? And I'll admit, Justin, that I haven't really seen that in many other places. But I'll say that, product marketing is hard and it's tough because the charter is broad. My old CMO at Seismic, her name was Paige O'Neill. She used to say, product marketing is the glue that connects all of the different teams together. And she's right. That was my experience as well, is that a great product marketer is also, they own the entire customer journey. So they should also understand how the business is transacted and then figure out, okay, well, what are all the levers in the company and what's happening, right? And how do you orchestrate that? That's a hard thing to do. I think it's difficult in smaller companies and smaller startups because typically those functions are relegated, like product marketing is relegated to, hey, I need messaging, I need positioning, and I need enablement. And often the founders or other teams would focus on basically on the other functions of product marketing. And so I think that it's changing a little bit over time. I mean, the other thing I should add is that often when you're a small startup, you're building new things, you're innovating, and there is no what have we done before, right? It's pretty new. And so the people that are closest to, iterating from problem solution fit or problem market fit to product market fit and beyond is going to be the founders in those hands-on stages. So I'm hoping that as product marketing matures and that people actually start to see the breadth of what you can deliver and the skill sets of those people in those roles advances and broadens, that they'll be given more permission to solve those. I'll just kind of tell you one quick thing, which is, I love this quote, which is product marketing owns the problem and they build products to solve that problem. And product marketing takes the product to market and ensures it gets sold, right? So I think about that. I've always thought about that philosophy. And I think, all right, I've got to understand from the marketing side all the way to the sales side, what's going on, to the point where I want to know, like, what is my sales, what's my defined sales team methodology, right? Where am I losing opportunities? How can I build pipeline or help guide everybody to pipeline that's actually, ideal for my sales teams to close efficiently, right? So.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear about Adobe's approach to product marketing. It's really like advanced, right? Like you said, there's not a lot of companies that think about it in such a strategic way. I would say on the B2B side, there's not many that I've come across. A lot of the times it is, there's the risk that it becomes this tactical content generation machine for sales enablement and other things, right? On the B2C side, I think that when you were talking about Adobe's approach, it made me think of at like consumer packaged good companies like Procter and
Mm,
Gamble and so on, how they have, I think they call them brand managers there, but essentially they're like GMs of that brand or that product
yeah.
portfolio. And it seems very similar to the way that you guys were approaching product marketing. So really, really fascinating. At that event that we were at the other day, one thing that I found that was really interesting, and I hadn't heard this so much before, but now it's like popping out of everywhere, kind of, is especially at early stage companies, it seems like there's an appetite for marketers that have sort of a mixed skill set, right? That first marketer that you hire being sort of a semi product marketer that can help with that foundational, who is our ICP, what is our point of view, what is our positioning and messaging, that sort of foundational marketing stuff, to also, hey, we need to grow really quickly and we need to start acquiring customers. So this marketer also needs a growth and demand gen skill set. I think, at this point, that type of person is somewhat of a unicorn. There's, obviously folks out there that can do that stuff. I think you match sort of that profile of a person that has both sides of that coin, right? But I'm curious, why do you think this is to me, I think this is a newer emerging sort of need in the market. Why do you think suddenly we're seeing this need of this mix of product marketer / growth marketer? And as you think about, like, let's say a young product marketer or a young demand gen person, somebody that has like half of that skill set, how do you advise them to position themselves to maybe take advantage of this wave, right? And sort of ride this trend?
Yeah. Maybe I'll start off by saying, get out there and meet people. And I want to give you and George a great plug. That was an awesome event. I had low expectations going to that event. So there was an event that we did, or that you guys did a couple of weeks ago, that brought in product marketers. I mean, it was a great holistic event, but I was so impressed and blown away by the panel, like the panelists that you had. And it was really inspiring to see how these founding PMMs were doing so much with AI and just with the resources that they had. And a lot of that was going to events like the one that you guys put together and learning and meeting other people to understand, like, what are my skills? Where am I strong? Where am I lacking? What did I learn something new that I should be learning? And so a lot of that is about asking these different questions. And so if I'm on the PMM side, and I'll answer your question in reverse, but if I'm on the product marketing side and I'm looking at basically my business and I'm hearing from my business leaders, like, we've got to grow double digits and actually cut costs. How do we do that, right? So then as a product marketer, the questions, right, and this is all about asking questions, is, all right, do I really understand how my business is transacted? What does actually revenue look like? What are all the different levers? And do I have a big churn issue? Do I have a net new logo issue? Am I hitting my numbers based on expansion? Like, just get into the business and understand that. Pretend like it's your money, right? So that's one thing. And then the other question, second question you ask is, am I really articulating to the company all about our customer and how do they go through their discovery, trial, evaluation? Like, tell me about that customer journey and tell me all about them. And, do I have all of the core fundamentals outlined, right? And if you have all those things outlined, which most product marketers do, the question you should ask is, all right, how are we going to market? And this is something that I think that PMMs don't do enough of. So I'll just give you an example. Companies where you are mid-market enterprise, B2B SaaS, multi-threaded group buying dynamics, and the company lives in an MQL world, right? I'm going to say, and put some pressure on the product marketer to go, wouldn't you have wanted to ask and say, like, why are we doing individual leads? Because based on my research and what I know, this is all about group buying. And I need you guys to make sure that you guys get these people and these protractors and detractors advanced or nullified, right? Like, you should have a strong opinion about your go-to-market, I'm not saying you should own it because it could be really big, but ask the right questions of like, hey, like people don't buy our products transactionally. It's a strategic sale. So we might want to consider broadening this, or you're missing these signals. This is what my data is telling me, right? If you're in product marketing, you want to be, or sorry, in on the sales side, you want to be understanding, hey, like what is that sales methodology? Do you include IT in there? They should be in earlier stages versus late stages because that's why we're losing opportunities, right? So just a lot of those questions, I think product marketers should be asking, and that parlays into the demand gen side, right? So like, do product marketers really understand, modern demand gen machinery or like the processes that, have been around for the last decade? There's an opportunity to build that out. And I think what I just tell you is that this isn't something that I'm not that smart to come up with this stuff. I've had conversations with a lot of people that have gone down this path of product marketing and demand gen. People like Katrina Wong, who's the CMO of New Relic. We used to have these conversations of like, do you see this connection happening? And it was like, yeah, like here's what I'm noticing, and this is what I'm seeing, and this is how we're trying to align everyone together. And so that's just how I've seen it play out, and that's what I would ask, new product marketers, or if they want to take it to the next level, to look at.
Very cool. So you mentioned that you worked at Seismic, right? And this is a show that is about product marketing, go to market, but really also about sales enablement, right? And sales enablement is obviously a passion of mine. I came from a sales background into product marketing with a focus on sales enablement. So I really wanted to just get your perspective on the practice. You've been a product marketer that enabled sales people, but you've also worked at one of the most successful and largest companies in the sales enablement space, a company that was pretty fundamental in establishing sales enablement as a practice. So would love to get just your take on that space. And what are some of the key learnings that you acquired working for not just enabling salespeople, but like working for one of the behemoths in that market? And now it's sort of geeking out a little bit on the GTM engineering and the on the AI side. Like, where is this space going? What are some of the key things that you have your eye on, trends, innovations that really excite you as you think about the next phase of this space?
Yeah. So Justin, I joined Seismic for 3 reasons. The first reason was, the rationale of, what, every company I've worked at had sellers. Every one of those companies had sellers that needed training and enablement, right? So huge market opportunity, right? Number 2 was, as a product marketer, I felt the pain of building a lot of content for my sales teams that they never used, or that was challenging for them to find. Like there was a lot of friction with a lot of that dynamic between the two. And just, I'll kind of throw you a plug in terms of just, you've got some great content from previous GTM Pack episodes around like just some of those challenges and why content is always a miss on that. So would urge your listeners to go back and look at the previous episodes. But the third thing was, I really felt like Seismic thought deeply and very thoughtfully and strategically about solving the problem. They took enablement to a whole level that I had never really thought about, right? It was, this mantra of like, how do you plan, enable, engage, and improve? And there was a whole process and methodology that they outlined. It was a platform, right? And there's a bunch of components in all of those platforms. And I thought it was very well thought through. And so when I joined, there was a lot of the ZERP GAC era challenges that every company went through for sure. But some of the learnings, and this is just so interesting to me, Justin, especially seeing what you guys are doing and how AI is actually changing the game. I think a couple of things is that enablement for a lot of sales leaders is more of a nice to have versus a must have. And for me, it was like, oh my God, like you're spending all of this money and spend on your, like just your cost of customer acquisition through your sales teams. Like, why don't you want to teach them how to use a net or a spear really, really well, right? It's really important. But, one could argue about the cost value of that compared to what Seismic was charging, because I will say that Seismic was great, but the solution they were selling was mid-market enterprise going after a real premium tier of the marketplace. And in many ways, that I think bodes well for companies that already see the value of enablement at a super high level, right? But there's a giant, mid and long tail of companies that are still on their journey. I think the second thing is that sales behavior is really hard to change. Sales, I can imagine being a teacher and trying to teach, a classroom. Everybody learns and consumes information differently. And I think that it can be quite challenging, right? And so this is one of the biggest things, was just seller behavior was hard to change. And I think now a lot of the conversation, kind of in terms of where it's going, is like, meet sellers where they are, right? How do you go from platforms to embedded workflows, and how do you as companies figure out we are just right there with you when you need us to be there with the right asset that you need, and it's the way that you want it, right? So there's a lot of, and then how much are you willing to pay for that, right? So I think those are the things that I started to see of like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. And AI is changing so much of that game, right? To me, like a lot of legacy companies' core value props that they were able to charge a certain premium for is, those margins are now competed away, right? Because of AI. And I think that the new game is, how do you figure out when to be relevant, where, and in a elegant way that people understand, or that sellers understand. So that's kind of just my take. Yeah, there was a lot of competition, in the space as well, and there continues to be, and there's a lot of innovation. But is there a need? Absolutely. I don't think the world of sellers will go away, even in the age of AI. I think that low value, information dispersion sharing, will go to agents or automated agents. But at the end of the day, people still, I believe, they need to talk to sellers, or they want to talk to sellers. And I might be an old generation, but I want to be able to talk to someone and say, hey, look, I've got this situation in this case, but I have like 10 other questions I want to ask. And I want my seller to help me navigate through those challenges ultimately. So that's my take.
Awesome. Well, Kenny, this was so fun. I feel like there's so much more that we can unpack in all these topics. So maybe we'll have to have you on for a future episode, or a office hour or something, where we can go deeper into one of these topics. But for those that really enjoyed the conversation today, they want to maybe connect with you, follow along on the journey, maybe even work with you, where is the best place for folks to find you and connect with you?
LinkedIn is going to be the best place. At Kenny KH Lee, my DMs are open. Slide into them. So.
Awesome, Kenny. Well, thanks again for the time today, for the great conversation. And until next time, take care and have a great day over there.
Awesome. Justin, now that I know that you're in Marin, we're going to have to do this live next time over beers in front of a dock somewhere.
Deal. Well, I have a lot of learning to do from you, especially on the GTM engineering side. So maybe we'll do a live session in Sausalito, right by the water, for everybody to enjoy the view and the content.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.